Okay, today the program is, we have made a little changes to the program. Basically, is first and foremost, I'd like to introduce Sean Francis. Sean, I discovered him in Singapore. He's an Australian butcher. You see, he looks very mature, right? And he's from the butcher, the retail store. Sean, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Like Rose said, I work in Singapore. I'm the general manager of a company called The Butcher. Pretty imaginative name. I've been there for 3.5 years now. I came from Adelaide in Australia, and I did my butcher's apprenticeship in a country town called Kadina, which is about 2 hours away from Adelaide City. I started when I was 14, when I left school, and I basically started scrubbing the floor and crushing boxes and worked my way through my 4-year apprenticeship. I think now, I overheard someone say before about apprenticeships getting shorter. I think butchers' apprenticeships have gotten a lot shorter now as well, but I had to suffer through a solid 4 years. It was a good experience. I did that in some supermarkets and some private butcher shops. I went on to become a manager of a butcher shop when I was 19, which was a good experience. I've somehow ended up in Singapore running an Australian meat company, which is once again another very good experience.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Okay, I do see some Aussies in the room who are from Australia. Yeah, Aussie, oi, oi, oi. Okay, now, first and foremost, I'd like to introduce to you the role of MLA. I think some of you has worked with us before over the years. And first slide, please. Can I have the first slide? Oh, sorry, am I going to press it? Okay. Right. In summary, right, MLA, we are marketing board, promotional board for Australian beef lamb. So our role is to market Australian beef and lamb to retailers and to food service end users like chefs and so on. So, and beside that, we are a non-profitable organization. The organization is owned by the farmers in Australia who raise the cattle and the sheep. So we are all very committed to the industry, and we are very excited to be here, to be sharing with you the butchery on the whole lamb and DRAM. And at the same time, we have a lot of Q&A. There are some aprons to be worn. And at the end of the session, we have a sampling of the lamb and beef for you at the end of the session. All right? Okay. Now, MLA has been in Asia and around the world. Basically, Australian meat industry has been promoting Australian meat and also selling the product to more than 120 countries in the world. So for Asia, for Southeast Asia, these are the programs that we have worked on over the years. So if you look onto the left logo, the top left, which is the Golden Bull Culinary Competition, this is a competition based on Western and Asian platter style for family. So we started this program in Malaysia 2 years ago, and the latest we had this competition in Myanmar. We introduced this, it's a team competition. Now on the second program that we have activity in Asia is the Iron Butcher Challenge. So the butchers, whether they are from the hotel or from the retail industry, they can compete among each other during the food shows such as Food Hotel Malaysia and so on. Then at the bottom is the Red Majesty Chef program. You know, in Asia, we have a lot of Chinese restaurants, and over the years, they have always been serving very basic beef and lamb recipes. It's either black pepper or it's just a Mongolian lamb on the menu. So through this program, we have educated about 30 chefs from Malaysia, Singapore, and China, and Beijing on the utilization of Australian beef and lamb in Chinese cuisine. And on the other side of the slide, which is the banqueting innovation, we also have a program on banqueting for banqueting chefs, on utilization of non-oil cuts in banqueting. Below that is the Asian Cuisine Conference. So we do have Asian Cuisine Conference where we gather all the Asian chefs to discuss about the current issues in Asia, how the chefs should be progressing, what kind of recipe they can be developing for beef and lamb. And lastly, is the Rangers program. We did this program recently this year in Singapore, and we had some of the chefs here in the room. Where are they now? Yeah, hi Gillian, hi. Okay, next. Okay, just a quick rundown on the Australian meat industry. Our industry is more than 200 years. So in other words, the farmers and the exporters in Australia, they are very committed to the industry. They have been supplying very tender, safe, and quality meat to all these 120 countries in the world. So they do have a very good history and experience for more than 200 years. Australia has got a natural advantage. You know, if you go to Australia, the weather is beautiful. It's an island continent, so we are free from diseases. We do not have mad cow disease, and we have very clean water. The air is very clean, and the pasture land the farm is so vast. Even from one neighbor to another neighbor, you know, you can't even see them for a week or a month. So it is that huge. Okay, in terms of Australian farming, right, we are talking about the northern and the southern production. Now, the southern production, most of the weather in the southern production, like Victoria, New South Wales, South Australia, they have a cooler climate. So basically, the breeds that are in these areas are mainly the temperate breeds. Breeds of the sheep and livestock and cattle, they are mainly from the European breeds like the Hereford, Angus, and so on. And for the sheep, it is mainly for the meat and the wool production. In the northern part of Australia, like the Northern Territory, it is much hotter and dry. So most of the cattle on this pasture land, they are Brahmins. So they are the Southeast Asian, you know, the Asian cattle where there is a hump on the back of the cattle, okay? And the sheep is mainly for the wool. Just a short explanation on the traceability system in Australia. We've got the best traceability system in Australia. Basically, when a calf is born, they have a year tag that is attached to the year. This is like a passport for the cattle. So this is where it tells where they are born, which farm they are from. And from there, the farmer has to record the details. They have to declare on the National Vendor Declaration Form, where they have to write down all the details of the cattle or the sheep on this form. And when the livestock or when the cattle or sheep is being sold at the sale yard, they are being bought by processor, the meat companies, and they are being transported to the farm. At the farm, they are being slaughtered and they are being packed and shipped to all parts of the world. So if you want to have an experience on how they do the slaughter and all this, we'd like to invite you to the MLA stand in ground level where we have the virtual reality and you can try and watch from virtual reality, okay? Then comes to the sheep. Some people asked us, you know, is a sheep same as the goat? Basically, sheep, there's three main breeds that we have in Australia, which is the Pole Merino, Pole Dorset, and the Dopper Lamb, okay? Then we have the goat meat. Goats are basically more of a tropical breeds, and they are goats, so the meat that derived from goats are called goat meat. They are not the same as mutton, right? And they are very lean meat and usually used for curry. Okay, in terms of sheep meat, basically there are two categories. The main one is the lamb. Lamb is up to 12 months old. It's got 0 permanent teeth. And if they are more than 3 years old, they are known as mutton. And if they are in between lamb and mutton, they are hogget. So when you buy beef and lamb from Australia, the most important document that you have to check is the carton label. Every carton has got a label. The label basically tells you, okay, where it comes from, what cut of meat is in there, how big and how heavy is the cut of meat, is that halal slaughter? So the MS shown on the label here, Victoria MS, is Muslim slaughter, all right? And the Australian 999 is the establishment number. What it means is where does the product comes from which factory. So this is a very important label when you buy beef or lamb from Australia. Okay, I think most of you basically know about chill meat, why you chill meat and not frozen. Because chilled meat is more juicy. Frozen meat, when you thaw it, is a bit dry because you lost all the meat juice. So from our point of view, when we do a lot of promotion with the consumer, we always encourage the chefs to use chilled meat because it's tastier, it's more convenient, and it's fresh. And in terms of value for money, it's got a good yield, and you can do so much with it. It's so versatile compared to frozen meat. You have to thaw it properly. Some people thaw it in the water because they didn't plan the thawing earlier. So basically, we prefer for the chefs to use the chilled meat, the beef and lamb. The next one is the shelf life. I think most of you in the room, you know this already. So for Australian beef, when we mention about bone-in beef, it has to be like 8 to 10 weeks from production date. If you remember the carton label, go back. Sorry. If you go back onto the carton label, okay, the date packed on 17 April 2011. For example, today is the 13th of July 2018. If it says from 12 weeks from the production date, that means 3 months from the 13th of July. So August, September, October. So in other words, the chilled beef can be kept in the chiller in 0 degree for up to 12 weeks, okay? If it's a lamb and it's a bone-in, it can be kept up to 6 to 8 weeks, all right? So this is how you can keep the meat for how long, okay? So the next one is I'll pass on to Sean, who will do the demonstration on the whole lamb. Sean, on to you.
Thank you very much, Rose.
Welcome.
Okay, so who has actually seen one of these before? Okay, that's good. Did you see it in a carton box or hanging in a fridge, on a rail, or what particular way would you have seen it in your industry? Hanging, so a bit of both? Okay, so predominantly in Asia, you'll get it in a cardboard box. It'll come broken up into a 6-way cut, basically in the cuts that you can see on the screen up here. So I'll just quickly talk you through the cuts versus what's on the cartoon-looking lamb up there. So we'll start with the neck, which is right here. This lamb's already been cut in half, obviously, so I'll just go through it like this. Next, just here. The forequarter is coming through here, and the shank is coming through here. This is the foreshank, and this is the hind shank down the back here. The rack is the next after the forequarter. Then next to that, you've got your short loin, which is where you get your loin chops, and then here you've got your chump, and then you've got the leg. And just here, this plate here is what you would call a flap or a breast, but here they've got it down as ribs, same thing. Okay, so I'll just go through the breaking of the different parts. So first, what you would normally do if it was hanging on a rail, which is how you would probably see this normally, is you would take the leg off you would take the forequarter and the midloin off the legs, and you would leave the legs on the rail. So the way that you would do that is you would find the joint, which is just at the end of the chump, which is what you'll do is you'll be able to easily insert your knife through here. So this will be hanging, so you've got the pressure of the weight pulling it down, and then what you do is you just find this little seam here, and you just work your way through. And then you can simply just break it off. Okay? The next thing you would do is you would normally do it on a bandsaw or a hacksaw, handsaw, like we've got here. You would take the 4/4 off of the mid. So normally you would take it from around about the 4th or the 5th or the 5th and the 6th rib. The reason for that is normally a lamb would always have about 13 ribs. And the rack being the most expensive, the most utilised part, the most prominent part that you would find in a restaurant. I'm sure you've all cooked lamb cutlets before. So the idea is to protect that area and just make sure that you get that 8-rib rack. So the way that you do that is you cut between the 4th and the 5th rib. So you can count down, so you go 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can come down to about here. And you can count backwards and go 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you know that you've hit the mark. So you go through and you make your mark through here. The breastbone is actually not as hard as it looks. You can get through it just with a little bit of pressure. All right, so once you've made your mark, you turn it over, and then you just make your line with your knife. Sometimes you can get through, depending on how this lamb's been split. This lamb has been split quite a little bit unevenly, which means we've got a little bit less spine on this side. So this lamb, this side here, would have a lot thicker spine bone. So this one is quite easy to go through, so we might be able to get through without our saw. Yep, quite easily. Okay, so here what we have is the midsection and the 4/4. All right, so the next thing we'll do is we will take this flap off of our loin. So what you like to do is you normally try and keep a little bit longer bone for your French cutlets because you like to display them nice and long. So you would sort of maybe 4 fingers, something like that, and you just make your mark straight down.
So Sean, what do you think, how heavy is this carcass?
This lamb here looks like it's around about 18 to 20 kilos.
18,
This looks
20?
like a little bit lighter, this one. Normally lambs coming out of Australia are usually around about 21. But this one's quite nice. You can see it's got nice, good fat coverage over the lamb. It's not been broken in any way. There's no signs of damage here. This is quite a nice one.
Okay.
So what we'll do now is we'll continue this line on the other side. This one you can't get through with your knife, so you've got to pull out your hacksaw and just get through. It's a little bit awkward. But we'll get there. There we go. Okay. So now what we've got is we've got our flap separated from our mid. We've got our leg and our 4/4. So, I can't quite see here. So basically what we've got on here is our lamb leg, which what we'll do is we'll start by taking off the chump first. So here we've got a little bit of flat meat which we'll take off, which is a very nice little bit of meat. Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. All right. So the lamb leg is just here, and we'll just go underneath this bone here, and we will come up through here. There's a little seam here that's quite difficult to find, but when you find it, everything becomes very, very easy. You just come through, and the idea is that you don't leave so much meat on this bone. So here we've got a tailbone. Okay. There we've got a bit of flat meat. This here is good for, you can use stir fry. You can use it for stir fry, but the best thing to do with it is nice and lean, mince it up, make sausages, make burgers, anything like that. It's quite good for that. Okay, what we'll do now is we'll take off the chump off of the leg. You will normally go about 1 finger below the hip bone here. Okay, so we'll go about like that. Make your mark. When you make your mark, you go through to the cutting board. So then when you turn it over, you can see your mark, just like that. Then follow it through the whole way through. And there you can see where the chump is and where the leg is. Next thing to do is to get your hacksaw out. Don't do what I did. Put your knife back in your pouch. Okay. All right. Once you hear that noise where it sounds like it stopped hitting bone, you stop doing it. If you keep using a hacksaw while you're not hitting bone, all you're doing is shredding the meat and making it really quite ugly. So you make sure you stop. So here is the chump, and here is the leg completely separated. All right. So what we'll do with this chump is on here, I see that there is some chump chops. Okay. What we'll do is we'll go one step further and we'll turn this into a rump steak. The reason we'll do that is because we're going to do a beef rump later, and you'll be able to see the difference between this and that, and then it will help you see how big a whole cow really is. All right, you come around here, and there's no method to this. All you have to do is follow the bone around as close as you can to the bone. Any meat that you leave on the bone is somewhat wastage, or you'll be peeling it off later and it will go into that same pile that you'll be using for sausages and burgers. So you come through here. Nice and easy. And there we've got a nice clean bone. And here we've got a nice boneless lamb chump. Fat in the bin. A lamb chump, in my opinion, is the best part of the lamb. You will very rarely hear that because everyone just wants to eat cutlets all the time, but the chump is full of flavour and very, very nice. All right, should I cut that into some steaks now?
Yes.
All right, no worries. All right, what we'll do is we'll cut that into some steaks, and I'll start to put together something for you guys to look at afterwards. All right, so what we do now is we take out our bigger knife, and we should be able to cut 3 really nice steaks out of this. So the first one we can face off a little bit. That little bit of meat there can go into our trim pile. How many of you guys have made sausages before? Impressive. Okay, so this here is absolutely perfect for sausages. It would be what we would classify as about a 90 or 80 CL, and it's a really good product for sausages and burgers. We sell a lot of sausages and burgers at the butcher in Singapore. It's something that we do really, really well. And the idea behind making a very good sausage is if you don't put anything bad in, nothing bad comes out. So only good ingredients in a sausage. So here we have 3 lovely lamb rump steaks. If this still had the bone inside, the bone would sit in the middle and they would be called chump chops. Okay? All right, the next step, what we'll do is we'll turn this lamb leg into an easy carve lamb leg. Has anyone ever heard of this before? No? Okay, so this is a very, very good, it's somewhat unknown. Like, I mean, a lot of people would know and might have seen it before, but it's not used as much as it should be because it's a fantastic method to cook with. So as chefs, you should seriously look at either buying these or for your own sake, you can try and do it yourself. So the first step to doing it is you would take this bone out, which is what you would call an H bone. So you go down here, around the bone. When you're going around this bone, you curve in a little bit. Right, you go around. Always try your best to cut away from yourself, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Hence why I've got this. All right, going around the bone here, this is what we call the ball joint. You can see that there. The idea behind getting this open is that it just releases everything and makes it so much easier. So once you've got that open and you get around the little pin bone up here, which is hidden up here, you get that done, then everything is very easy as soon as that's finished. So you get around there, we're nice and open. And there we go. So that's our bone out. And now we've got a lamb leg with the H bone out. So now this has only got 2 bones left in it now. We've got this one here and this one down here. So what we need to do is take this bone away. All right, we'll get him out. But while you've got stability in the leg, the idea is that you should clean up this end up here. So what we'll do is we'll French the hind shank. To French it properly, you need to get our handsaw, and we just take the tip off. Okay, there we go. All right, and there we have the French bone there. So now what we'll do, give our knife a little steel, which you learned earlier. And we'll go down this natural seam. The natural seam, you can see it, it just starts there. It's just through here. So you go down here and you get around this bone. Just here, we've got the kneecap. Release that. And then we start to work our way around this bone and getting it out as clean as possible without puncturing the skin at the back, because we need that later. We've got 4 of these coming out cooked later on for everybody. Just slowly working around. All right. Once you've got it all released and you've got one end of the bone in your hand, you just grab it and you roll it out and you just make little incisions which will release the bone. Once the bone's out, all you've got left is this one little kneecap here, which you can just take that out. And then this here is almost ready to go. This here is the knuckle, or you could also call it the round. You just release this a bit, and you roll this out. Very easy. That there is a sensational muscle for using diced, stir fry, steaks, really, really nice. We'll cut this one into steaks. It's a bit warm up here, Rose. Okay. Now, there's something hidden in this lamb leg. And it's bloody hot up here. Okay, so there's something in this lamb leg here which a lot of butchers will leave in. It's not something that you want to be serving up. there's actually a gland hidden between the top side and the silver side. So you want to just dig in here and you want to get this thing out. All right. It's important to get that out because otherwise when you cook it and you carve it, it will be right in the middle of your 3 to 4 main slices, right out the middle of this lamb leg, and you don't want that for your guests. All right. So this here is our easy carved lamb leg. I believe that I'll be doing a tying demo later, so I'll just leave this for now, and we'll grab that back in about 15 minutes when we're done with everything else. All right. Now the flap, this is something that we can use for sausage trimming, burgers, all that sort of stuff. I wouldn't be using it for much else because the meat is quite tough, but it's quite lean, so once you run it through a mincer, sensational, no problem. So you go through here, this bit here on top is what you call the skirt. So you get around here, release it, so you can see that there's a bone ending here and the bone's ending there. Once you've released it away from the bone, all you have to do is turn the flap over and you go hard up against the bone, releasing it slowly. Doesn't matter if you mess this one up or you cut into it or whatever because it's going through a mincer, so no big deal. Once you've released it off the top of the breast, it's quite easy because you've released it here, you've released it there. It's just a matter of holding that down and just pulling it off. These bones here, great for the dog. Okay, so now we'll deal with the rib section. What we'll do is I'll do a boned short loin and we'll do some cutlets. Okay, the short loin, we take that off of the rib by going through the joint where the ribs have completely stopped. We've got our 8 ribs here and then they've stopped here. So what you do is you go down and then nice little snap, midloin, cutlets. Okay, the midloin, what we'll do is we'll just bone that out. So can anyone tell me what this piece here is underneath? Okay, so this is the tenderloin, okay, or otherwise known as the fillet, okay? Probably the most, I think it is the most expensive part of the lamb. If you were to just buy them by themselves, they're very, very expensive. So the idea is to just try and get what you can out of your midloins, so you do not leave too much of this meat on the bone. You make sure you get every skerrick of it, okay? When you're doing a rolled midloin, you just release the tenderloin out, you turn it over, and then the idea is that you get the midloin bone out of there as well. This portion here on top of the bone is called a backstrap or an eye of loin. Okay, this is also an absolutely magnificent part of meat. This is the same bit of meat that you get in the middle of your cutlets, just a little bit further down the body. There's our bone there. As you can see, we're pulling a lot of bones out here. Lamb's yield, I think, is usually about 68%, 65% approximately of the lamb you'll get yield out. So there is quite a reasonable amount of wastage on a lamb. So when you get the ones that are a little bit bigger than this, you're getting a little bit more meat over the ribs. Your eye is a little bit bigger, but your bone structure is very similar. So the idea is that you get them a little bit bigger and you'll get a little bit better yield. So now you've got your loin with the flap on. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this flap meat. It's quite lean, you can see. All right. The idea is that you get your tenderloin, and you can see that the short loin, the backstrap loin here, is a little bit thicker at this end. So when you lay this back in, you want to lay your thicker end down here at the smaller end so it counteracts the yield of this side. So you just lay it in like that. A little bit of bone left in there. And then you can roll it over. Tuck that in. This is a really, really nice cut to be putting stuffing into. One that we sell in Singapore, we sell a lot of it, is a feta cheese and a sun-dried tomato and olive. So it's like an Italiano lamb loin roll, which sells really quite well. So what we do is we open it up, we sprinkle Greek feta cheese, put a line of sun-dried tomato down the middle, and then put a little bit of olives over there. We sit that in, we roll it in like that, and then it gets hit with the string or the netting. Very nice product. That's the loin. Now what we've got here is our rack. Now as you can see, when the lamb got split in half, we've managed to, our chef downstairs managed to get into the spine a little bit. So I'll just try and correct that as best as I can. So then we can get this off. Now, the bone that's coming across here is called the chine bone. A lot of people call it the chime bone, but it's the chine with an N. It's the bone that basically means that you can't use your knife. It gets in the way of your knife and you can't get through. So the idea is that we just try and get the rest of this chine bone off. Like I said, that noise changed there, which meant I've stopped cutting bone and I've hit the meat, means you stop instantly because you don't want to be grinding the meat with that hacksaw. It will make it very, very ugly. Okay, something else that needs to be done. There's another bone there for the pile. Something else that needs to be done to this rack is this bone here, which has come out of our shoulder. This needs to be taken out. You don't want this. It's called the scapula. Okay, so we take that out. So we just go in and scoop that one out. And what we'll do is we'll just turn this into a little rack of lamb or something. All right. So what we do is we've got our ribs here. Like I said, we're at about 4 fingers, which is about a nice length. And then we'll go down. There's many different ways to French a rack of lamb. The thing that you probably don't get taught is that when you see a lamb and the consistency of the lamb, you'll use different methods for Frenching. When something's a little bit colder and it's got a bit more fat on it, the other method of going up and down and pushing, but this lamb has been wrapped in plastic and thawed out. So what this means is it's become, the skin you can see is quite wet and it's quite sloppy. You can bend it and you can maneuver it so well. Not the best for butchering demonstrations. So what you do is something nice and easy is you can just go up and down the bone, and then you can go back in and out and scratch them down later. This meat is also known as the rib meat, the rib finger meat, intercostals. This is another one of those things that you don't want to catch your apprentice throwing in the bin, because that's what happened to me. And back in those days, your boss was still somehow able to physically harm you when you made a mistake. So you don't want to have this being thrown in the bin. So this is another one to be put into sausages, another one to be put into burgers, another great way of using up the whole carcass. Okay, so now once we've got all that meat off, we can go through and we can French our bones, which I'm sure you've all done this before, yeah? The idea here is to use the heel of your knife, as it is quite sharp. And I am sorry, after seeing Mr. F-Dick get up here, that I don't have an F-Dick on me. I'm actually using a geezer. But I am a very, very big fan of F-Dick knives. I just wasn't allowed to bring mine on the plane, believe it or not. Once again, another cut that you don't want to be wasting. If it's boneless and it's lamb, You don't want to be throwing it in the bin. Okay, like I said, using the heel of your knife, which is this section here. The reason it's so good to be using for this is because you don't want to use the tip of your knife, because this is actually not good for it. And the heel of your knife is always very, very sharp, because you'll notice once you guys start to sharpen your knives a lot, you'll notice that you guys are constantly sharpening the whole blade, but you're very, very rarely using the heel. So what happens is you end up with this back end section of your knife, which ends up very, very sharp, which is another reason you should always hold your knife properly behind the lip. Don't let your fingers creep under here, otherwise you will soon know about it. Okay, so this here is a French cap-on rack of lamb. The cap is here. As you can see, the cap really isn't much because we do have a very lean lamb here, so we can just go ahead and just take that off. But I do like to leave a little bit of fat on, so I'll leave it like that for now. And if our chef who's cooking it for us would like to take it off, or would like me to take it off, he can say so. Okay, so here we have our French cap-off rack of lamb. Now this here is what you would call just a lamb shoulder, also known as a forequarter. Obviously the reason they call it a forequarter is because it's four, which is forward, and it's a quarter, okay? So what we'll do with this, nice and simple, is I'm just going to bone it out, okay? And we'll make a really nice bone and rolled lamb shoulder roast. But something that is absolutely spectacular is if you take the neck off, which I will do anyway, and you take the breastbone here, and you take the shank off, you have a lamb square cut, which I'm sure you guys would have seen on boxes of lamb, because this is how they would normally package the lamb that comes in a box. They would call it a lamb square cut. And what it is it's this section with our neck taken off, and the breastbone taken off, and the shank taken off. But because I'm boning it out, I'll leave it all on and I'll do it after. All right. So when you're boning out a shoulder of lamb, I'll normally start by going down to the breast area, the breastplate, and let the ribs guide you in your first cut. So you make sure you take a little bit up so you can get your fingers on there. And then all you have to do is just stay as close to the ribs as you can and make sure that you're not leaving any meat behind. Now we've taken the ribs off, and up here is where the neck starts. So a good way to get around there, because it gets a little bit tricky because the neck's got a lot of pin bones and a lot of different size bones, is you use this as a handle. So you just nick with your knife, you go up and down, and you just pull the bones around, and you just pull. If you don't know where you need to cut, you just give it a pull, move it around, and you can see what's being attached and what needs a little bit of a nip with the knife, and you're all good. So this here is the ribs and the neck bone, okay? Now what we'll do now is we'll go through and we'll move this bit of meat up. We'll get through and we'll show the scapular bone in its entirety. The scapular bone is what you would call the shoulder blade, or what we would call a shoulder blade. We take any excess fat off the top here, anything that you don't think that you want to be cooking with or eating, especially got to watch out for these little fellas, these little glands here. If you see that, instantly just take it out. Then what you need to do is you need to work on taking this scapula out. There's a bit of a knack to it. you'll see that there's a ball joint just here. You just need to release it. You go down to the scapula and you scoop. It's a bit concave, it'll go in, so you go in and you scoop it down. As you can see here, nice and clear, we've got a nice scapular bone here being shown. You can see that there's a little cut here, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my knife in here and I'm going to release this section. Best way to do it is to just push down here, and what this bit does is it comes up, and then you can get in. Now what we do is we go around the scapula and then we get under it. Once we're under it, and you can feel that you've released everything, you can see here the scapula comes down and then there's a pin bone. Once you've released that, it's quite easy just to push that down and then you just pull it. Use your knife to scoop the rest out. Sometimes a little persistent part will stay on, but we'll hang on to that. And there you've got your scapular bone. Another one for the bone pile. All right, any trimming, take a bit of that off, we'll tidy it up. This section here is the neck fillet. Probably the most precious part of the shoulder. Absolutely stunning. It's what we call, on the beef, it would be like a Q roll, ribeye, Scotch fillet. This is what you would call a lamb Scotch fillet. So here, we've got a yellow bit of what we would call paddywhack. It's a very, very backyard term for it. What this does is it actually holds the lamb's head up. You can see here that the paddywhack goes all the way through to the neck, and it came here. It tends to start to dissipate around about the loin here. It will go down a little bit, but what this does is it gives the lamb the strength to be able to lift its head up and down, and that comes from this very, very hard bit of paddywhack here. You give this to your dog, you'll be chewing for hours. They love it. Okay, so let's get back on here. Now what we can do, the easiest method is not far apart from the hardest method. So what we'll do is we'll get rid of a bit of this fat under here, because there's no good there. That's all just pure fat, and a gland is hidden in here. So you want to get that out. No, we'll throw that in the bin, sorry. All right. So now what we'll do is, sometimes you'll see some people will roll the shank back into the shoulder, sometimes they don't. Depending on the time of the year is when you would do it or not. In summer, when you can't give shanks away because no one's doing stews or casseroles, you roll it back into the shoulder so you can sell it. In the winter, you're pulling shanks off of anything you can, and you're buying them in as well, because shanks are just selling like hotcakes. So, seeing as it's constantly summer here, I'll roll it back in. So now what you have to do is do exactly what we did before with that easy carve lamb leg, where we will just release all the meat around. Once again, you just take your time. There's no secret method to this. It's just knowing where the bone is and making sure that you don't slash the skin underneath, which will cut your lamb piece in half, and then it makes it even harder to roll. Okay, and here we have our shank bones. They're off now. So now what we've got is a boneless lamb shoulder. We roll this, here's our shank meat. We can put that back in here and put that over the top, or we can put that over the top and put that back in here, or you can just take it off and throw it into sausages, whatever you wish to do. Okay? So here we have a bone and rolled shoulder of lamb. So that there concludes breaking down a whole lamb from that to that.
Okay, Sean, we have another cut for you to do, which is the beef drum.
Yes.
And then, okay.
Oh, sorry, I was meant to flick through that, wasn't I? Sorry, everybody.
That's okay, that's okay. In your bag, there is all the cuts in the booklet. So the next one, we are talking about Australian beef, and the cattle breeds in Australia. Just now I mentioned, temperate breeds are mainly from the cold climate. There is Hereford, Angus. Then from the tropical breed, there's the Brahman, which you will see in many in the Asian countries. Okay, we're talking about Wagyu. Most people ask the difference of the Wagyu. So you have the F1 crossbreed, 50% with another breed, F2, F3, F4, and full blood Wagyu, 100%. Most of the time, the Wagyu cattle is a draft animal. So it's naturally, it can actually put on a lot of fat. And from what I understand, when I went to a Wagyu farm, they basically eat 25 kilo of grains per day. And they put on a lot of weight as they go along. All right? Okay, so on to Sean. Sean has got the last cut to show you. Basically, I think most of you in the room understand, especially in Asia, you will explore a lot of cuts like the tenderloin, strip loin, and rib eye. And in fact, in the last 10 years, MLA, Australian meat industry, we has been promoting the non-loin cuts, the cuts other than the tenderloin, strip loin, and rib eye. The reason why we are promoting these cuts is because they are very versatile. They can, like for a D-rum, in a D-rum, there are 5 muscles in there. Traditionally, most people will cut across the D-rum, just across the D-rum. But nowadays, a lot of chefs, in fact, in this convention center, for nearly 8 years, they have started to use the non-loin cuts for the banqueting. And it has proven to be very effective, very versatile, value for money, and they can use different muscle of a D-rum for different cooking methods. So on to you, Sean.
Okay,
this
thank
will
you
be
again.
our last cut of the day.
Yeah.
This is just an example of a non-loin cut. So when you see how Sean separate the muscle, we like you to go back to your kitchen or to your school to explore other non-loin cuts like the top side, the knuckle, the brisket, and all other cuts that actually has a lot of benefits in helping you to manage your food cost. Right, Sean?
Correct. The non-loin cuts are absolutely fantastic, but butchers and MLA restaurants are always doing our best to promote non-loin cuts because one is there's more value for money, and a lot of them just genuinely have more flavour, and it takes someone skilled like yourself to cook it correctly for them. I still get down to the stores very often and serve customers because I just genuinely enjoy it. And you can talk to customers for 5 minutes about how fantastic a bit of skirt steak is, or how fantastic a bit of chuck is for a casserole, or whatever. And they will listen to you. They love it, and then they'll just say 2 ribeye, thanks. And it's quite difficult, but it takes time. But it genuinely takes someone to cook it correctly and do a good job of it. And if as a trainee chef, it's fantastic for you guys to spend time on getting it right, because you can't go through your career hiding behind the loin cuts, and because you can make mistakes with cooking them and you will still get away with it. But if you as a chef can cook a fantastic skirt steak or whatever, it really separates you from the rest, genuinely.
Okay, can the cameraman zero on the meat cut? This is actually a grass-fed D-rum. Sean, can you just show, with your knife, traditionally, how does a butcher slice the rum, the D-rum?
What I'll do is I'll take off what needs to be taken off anyway.
Yep.
So underneath here is a lot of channel fat and a lot of sinew. What we do is we go through here and we separate the top cap to the roast beef. Okay, we'll take off this bit of fat here. There is a natural seam, which is quite easy to follow. But then this is normally as far as they will go. And then after this, it's a matter of start to slice.
So traditionally, do they just slice one big slice?
Traditionally, a lot of butchers and a lot of people will be used to seeing a rump steak just cut straight down like that. I'm sure you've all seen a rump steak like this. You know, you can see your top cap muscle on the top, and then you see your muscle on the bottom, which is traditionally just known as your roast beef or your rump cap.
So why do you want to separate the muscle? Like, what is the advantage of separating the muscle?
Okay, there's two things that spring to mind when I think about separating the muscle. First one is the fact that you can get smaller cuts out of it, because over the last 10 to 15 years, people are eating less but eating better quality. So people, especially in Asia, they're not buying the big 600-700 gram rumps. We haven't got the weather for eating a huge steak. We'd be basically in a coma. I know I'd be basically in a coma before I ate a 500 or 600 gram steak these days, even at my size.
Right.
But basically, the other main thing is especially with the rump, you've got the grain, which is running different ways. And you never want to cut with the grain. So if you can separate this, it gives you the opportunity to cut every single individual part against the grain, which will always give you better results after cooking. So I'll go ahead and cut it down. So like I said, the first thing that you would do as a normal cut is you would go down here. And the reason that this is called a D rump is because someone has slightly tidied it up and they've cut down here. And then you can see that it's a D. Okay? If you are cutting a rump and you're not sure about which way that you do need to cut it when you are, remember the D. Put it down and you will see, and you always cut the way that the D is, and you will never get it wrong. That is the traditional rump steak. But what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and I'll cut it down into there should be 5 subprimals, but when you get a D rump, they take the tri-tip off. So there's this tiny section here of tri-tip left. You'll see that a rump steak, you normally will have the full cap here, the roast beef, and there'll be this little lip which is hanging off the back, which has been taken off, but normally the tri-tip is here and it wraps itself around the knuckle. So you haven't got much of that left. So we'll count that as 1 so you can see it, but the rest of it we'll get the actual 4 out of. So like I said, first of all, we'll go ahead and take off this channel fat under here. The idea is that you scoop in and you get this out. It's definitely easy to do this. You go in and then you push it out. As I said before, always trying to do it away from yourself. But there's no harm in doing it the other way unless you stab yourself, which I have seen. So try to avoid that. So what you do is you go under here and you get all of this sinew, all of this hard skin off the bottom, because this hard skin off the bottom, if you cook this, it retracts and it will curl a steak up. Have you ever cooked a steak and it's curled up? What you can do is you can just put little nicks in it. If you insist on leaving it on there, you put little nicks in it and then it won't retract and it won't curl up when you cook it. All right, so we get that off. All right. Now here we've got the underside muscle, which has got a technical name, I believe. What have we got here? Oh, here we've got it. It's called muscle A. The underside of the rump is what they would call it. So what we'll do is we'll get that off. So it's, like I said, I didn't even use my knife then. There's a natural seam here. A lot of butchery is seam butchery. You ever heard that term, seam butchery? It means you just find the spot and you just work your way through. So here is that spot on a rump. So you go your way through. Just keep pushing, pulling. Your knife doesn't have to do all the work. Okay, you can still see the seams. You can see it up there, yep. All right, and then we have it, that's our undercut. Now, I do believe that our chef downstairs is cooking one of these for you guys to try today. To be honest, I've never actually done it, so I'm actually intrigued in how it's going to turn out. We got 2 of these, and we rolled them together as a roast. So yeah, we'll see how that turns out. Normally, I would just chop it right up and throw it straight through the mincer. There's a saying that I got taught quite young in my butchering career, which was somehow supposed to make me feel better about earning less money than a doctor, but it was doctors bury their mistakes and butchers mince theirs. So if you ever make a mistake before your boss comes, you just throw it into the mincer, okay? You should get away with it. But I still should have been a doctor, you know. So what we'll do is now, like I said, seam butchery. That was extremely easy. You can see it. It's very, very clear. The seam is here. You're basically doing it with your hands. Your knife's not doing anything. You go through. All I'm doing now is taking the fat off. The rump is one of the easiest cuts to take the fat off. You just go through, peel it over. Nice and easy. All right, so there we have our rump cap once we square it off. Okay, put that on our fat pile. This here is what you call a roast biff. Okay, so first of all, I'll show you the roast biff. I'll put that to the side and we'll show you the roast biff. So we'll separate this into two muscles. A lot of people might think that I'm just going to go ahead and cut this straight in half. But these muscles are not created equally. You've got an eye and you've got a center. So the eye is up here. Now, I'm not sure if you can see so well on the screen up there, but all I'm doing now is just cleaning off a little bit of fat, because when you clean off a little bit of the fat, you can start to see where the seams are coming. And can you all see that line there? You can see that? There you go. You can see that line just here? All right, that is the natural seam that we want to split, okay? But we don't do it from the top, because what it does is it goes in and it curves under. So we do it from the bottom, okay? And the best way to do that, oh, hang on, here's that little section of tri-tip. We'll get that off. Normally this would be a much bigger cut, but that's all we have left of our little tri-tip. Okay. All right, so what we'll do is we'll go through and we'll just get our fingers in here and we'll try and find this little seam. So the best way to do it is just to find it. It does run all the way through. You find it anywhere. Normally it's easier up here because you can see the join here. It's a bit messy here, and that's because this is where it's coming up through the rump, and this section will always be here. So you look for this section, you find the wall, and you get your knife up against it, and you just follow it. If you're not showing more and more of this, you're in the wrong spot. Okay? So here. All right, what I'm doing with my left hand here is I'm rolling it out, because once again, it's all about what you're doing with the other hand. And here what we have is our rump eye, okay, which is absolutely spectacular, lean, full of flavour, stunning. And sometimes you'll go to a restaurant and they'll call it an eye of beef. And I think it's great that they're doing it, but the problem is they're calling it an eye of beef and they're charging you tenderloin price. So it's a bit of a sneaky tactic, because it looks a little bit like a tenderloin, and if you cook it right, it'll be just as tender and more flavourful. So, and it is actually an eye. So you can thank me for that tip later. All right, now what we'll do is we'll go through here and we'll remove the other sinew off the other side of this rump. All right, as you can see, it's there. There's nothing wrong with that sinew. You can put it straight through the mincer, make lovely burgers, sausages, anything like that, spaghetti bolognese, all sorts. Okay, so here we have our rump centre. Absolutely stunning bit as well. Now, can someone tell me what the Brazilian name of this cut is? There's some aprons we're going to throw out later, but you can instantly get one if you can tell me what this is called. I'll give you a tip.
Who knows what cut is this? Put up your hand.
Was that? There you go, you got it. Yeah.
Who got it? Who got it? Sorry.
He's over there, I reckon, somewhere. Exactly it. Now, this cut here is the one that benefits the most from cutting it in the right direction. This is the cut, if you leave the rump whole, that gets cut completely sideways. Because as you can see, I've just taken this off the rump, and this is the direction it would have been cut. But if you can see so clearly, you can see that the lines are just so prominently going this way. So what you're doing is you're just cutting with it, but with a picanha, you cut it the other way, and you just get a much, much better result. Now, something about a picanha is if you get a really... I've serviced a lot of Brazilian restaurants in my time, and the ones that really know their stuff, what they do is they'll make you, and these are the one. This is actually the correct way. You see, there's 3 glands here. There's nothing bad in there like the lamb one. It's just these 3 prominent glands here. The picanha officially stops. I don't know who made this rule. It's just a matter of apparently there's more flavour in this part. It officially stops at the 3rd one. So a real fussy Brazilian restaurant will make you cut this section off, and they don't want it. So then you've got to charge them more money for this bit. But if that's what they want, that's what they want. The customer gets what they want. So this here is a picanha, simple as that. So that's it. Yeah, that's our rump broken down.
Sean, would you like to ask some questions?
Shall I cut this up into steaks?
Well, up to you.
Would you like to see this cut into steaks?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. So what I'll do is I'll cut this. I'll do this exactly how, because this is how it should be done for a Brazilian restaurant.
Okay, Sean, we have a question here.
Okay.
So with you segmenting your rump, which is going to be the tough part now?
The tough part?
Yeah, because the picanha is going to be tough if you're cooking it in the rump as traditional.
It's still okay. It's still okay. What it does is it takes a good cut to something excellent. It's not going to be tough. It's still a very good cut, but it just elevates it to that next level. So it's still all right. But as far as if I had to say to you what would be the toughest part of this rump, it's this undercut, which is why I mentioned before. We are going to. You're going to be tasting this soon. The chef was insistent to cook this. So
the undercut is the toughest of all the
on the rump by
of
far.
all the rump.
You can see here it's full of sinew.
Sinew,
it's
yes.
stringy. There's skin under it. I mean, like I said to you, I run this straight through the mincer.
Yes.
I was surprised when the chef downstairs told me he was going to cook it for you.
So let's try it afterwards.
We'll see
have
how it goes.
one apron for him
For
for
sure.
asking the question.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. Any question? Anyone has any question? Okay. Coming.
I'm just going ahead and cutting this into the traditional. Yep, go ahead.
Just would like to ask, for you, which part of the cut for you is the most difficult?
Difficult.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So that's an interesting question. There is something that there is a cut that a lot of butchers refuse to do anymore, and what that is a pork shoulder bone in, because you need to use the bandsaw for it, and it's a little bit intimidating because it's pulling on the meat when you're running through a bandsaw. And you'll see that I'm wearing this glove today because I was petrified of cutting myself in front of all of you people. But what would happen if you wore one of these gloves or a chain glove on a bandsaw? It would be much, much worse.
More dangerous, right?
Oh, it would be terrible. It would, instead of just nipping the end, it would catch the glove and it would pull you in. So what people have resorted to doing now is semi-freezing the pork shoulder, so then it's firm and you can run it through the bandsaw. So I would genuinely say that the pork shoulder bone in would be the most difficult part, or just genuinely breaking down a whole cow. Because, it's good for me to be able to bring out a rump, but you guys seen all of this rump here, right? And the rump on the lamb, I cut into these 3 cute little steaks here.
Okay, we have another question here too. Never.
Is it popular to use the meat from the head, the tongue, the heart, the liver?
When you say popular, it depends on what country you're talking about. Where I'm from, a lot of the older generation would always use a lot of the tongues and the livers and the hearts, but it's just never been something that really excites me. But I do believe that a huge percentage of all of the lips and the tongues and everything all seems to be going to
Asia.
To Asia, yeah.
Yes.
So maybe you guys are doing us a favour by taking it. So thanks so much. Yeah.
I think this all comes to trends. It all comes back.
Yeah.
It could be very trendy in Australia maybe 30, 40 years ago, but now maybe it's coming back. It's up to you as a chef.
Definitely,
to make it happen,
and it really, especially now when you guys are so, like the trade that you guys are entering is really getting pushed, and I mean, it really is up to you guys. So when you guys are all on TV, you just got to tell them how good a beef tongue is or a liver is, and they'll go for it.
Any more questions? Yes.
So here's our picanha steaks. How this is done. All right, one of these steaks, I'm not sure, have you guys ever been to a Brazilian churrasco, I think you pronounce it, churrasco restaurant? So how it's done is this steak is folded over and the stick is put through the middle just like that.
Chef, my question to you is,
Yep.
how different is the meat from MLA to Angus beef or the Kobe beef?
Sorry, what was that?
Angus beef is a beef from the Scottish origin.
The Scottish?
Yeah, the Kobe beef and the Angus beef.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Yeah.
How
So
different is this meat when compared to the Angus or the Kobe beef?
okay, so different breeds of meat, different breeds of cows perform a lot differently in different areas. Obviously, in your tropical parts of Australia, you get your Brahmins, you get those cattle that perform better in that kind of environment. Like your Brahmins and that essentially came from India, and then you get your European breeds which perform better in the cold. As far as eating quality, my personal preference is always going to be your UK breeds. They tend to have a better flavour, and the Brahmins and those sorts of cattle are a little bit tougher. But your Wagyus, as soon as you start to put more and more grain through cattle, you get more consistency, and it will always be more tender. But if the flavour is what you're looking for, grass-fed and things like that are a way forward. But yeah, I mean, they all perform differently, and honestly, if you get given a steak, sometimes it's hard to be able to tell what it is, but the best way to do it, and you should do it for yourself, is you should get a corn-fed, a grain-fed, a Wagyu grain-fed, and a pure grass-fed, and cook all 4 of them. And you try them all next to each other, and then from then on you will know and be able to tell the difference.
I think as a chef, right, in the menu, I think you should have all kinds of beef on the menu.
Yeah? Yeah?
Yeah?
Definitely.
Yes.
So this cut here, what we'll do is I'll make one into a little roast. So there, as you can see, if I told you that was tenderloin, would you argue? It really looks like a nice bit of tenderloin. So if you guys want to be sneaky, you can probably get away with that.
But you can't call it a tenderloin, right?
But you can't. You call it an eye. Okay.
Or beef medallion.
There you go, beef medallion. Yeah, okay, yeah, you can do that. So this is what I'm doing here, a beef medallion. Another thing you can do is if you don't think that this steak here is big enough, what you do is you go down, don't go all the way through, and you do something called butterflying. All right? So what we've got now is that would be an amazing roast. We should put that down to the chef. And then we've got 3 nice little eyes.
Your butterfly sticks looks like a Valentine stick, Sean.
A Valentine. Oh, it's a nice little heart, is it?
Yeah,
Okay,
looks like a
here we go.
heart.
There you go, guys. How's that? Is that good?
Yes.
Yeah, that's lovely, isn't it? Okay. All right, now I'll cut this center into it. Now, when you're cutting this one here into steaks, the first steak is always going to be a little bit average because what's happening is the meat is falling over. So you just face off that first bit. And this here, perfect for shazliks. Does everyone know what a shazlik is? Around the world we call them kebabs, shazliks, sticks, whatever it is. But this meat is absolutely perfect for that. Okay, and then we've got some steaks here.
Sean, I have a question.
Yeah?
How long did you take to become a butcher, a professional butcher?
Okay, if you ask me when I was doing my apprenticeship, it was 6 months. But it honestly took me about 5.5 years to really get to the level that I'm at today. There's a lot of butchers out there that can just sort of cut a bit of meat, but to have someone that can make sausages, that can make burgers and break down beef, where I've run boning rooms and I've had to do all these different parts, it really took me about 5.5 years. But there's a lot of unnecessary things that I probably don't need to know now. But it's good to know that I can do these things and teach them on, because like it is a dying art. But realistically, if I was saying for anyone to enter the trade now, it's usually about 3 to 4 years is what you should really be doing.
Do you think there's any benefits of becoming a butcher compared to chefs?
All right. So
how is the income going to be?
so basically, my honest opinion on becoming a butcher. I've been a butcher for 15 years now. If you asked me 6 or 7 years ago, I would have told you, don't do it, stay away, it's not great. But, when you get good at it, it's something that is much, much more appreciated now than what it was even 10 years ago, where there's so many butchers around, but now there's a lot of people not getting into the trade. So the people that are, not only are they getting paid more money, they're there because they want to be, and they learn faster and they do quite well. I wouldn't steer someone away from it. I genuinely wouldn't, but I wouldn't like for them to just become a butcher and just cut a bit of meat. They should learn how to manage a shop and learn how to make sausages and learn how to break beef and do all the things that contributes to the art of butchery. And when it comes to chefs like you guys, something I've really noticed since I've worked in Singapore is there's chefs and then there's butchers. When you find a chef that can cut their own steaks and do a bit of butchery, all of a sudden you're like a double threat. Like you guys can take the meat from the carton, and you guys can cut it and cook it and do everything. And there's a lot of restaurants out there with chefs employed in that restaurant, and then they've got a butcher there as well, because the butcher needs to cut all the steak, because chefs, they cut crooked. They'll put a steak down, and one end will be 1 centimetre and the other end will be 3 inches. If you guys can learn how to cut your own meat and do quite well, you will be a double threat, you will get paid more money, and you will be a lot more value to your employer.
I have a question for you.
Yep.
What would you say is the best part of the cow?
Okay.
The best one.
Okay, my favourite. Okay, the best part of the cow, honestly, it really is the ribeye. But it's always going to be consistent. It's got good flavour. It's easy to cook. It's a nice size. When you cut it, it's always going to be 250 grams, 300 grams, around about that size. But something that I really love, and I'll always take it to barbecues, and people always just think that it's absolutely amazing, is a skirt steak. Does anyone know what a skirt steak is? Real lean, flat bit of meat. It looks like a dinner plate, but it is just absolutely stunning. You cook that well, you cut it down the middle, and then you cut it against the grain. Absolutely stunning. It's got the most flavour, and it's just absolutely lovely. That there would be neck and neck my favourite cuts from ribeye and skirt steak. All right, so here's all the cuts all done.
Okay. Let's give a hand to Sean. Sean, we need you to cut up some lamb leg and steaks to try.
Yeah, is it over there cooked, is it?
Yeah, it's already cooked.
Ah, okay. All right, do you need me to cut that as well, do you?
Can you help?
One of these guys can do it, can't they?
Yeah. Can we please have some, Gillian, can you?
Who
make
here's
some?
carved a roast before?
Yeah.
Come on, you don't need me to do this one.
Any volunteers? Yes.
This is all ready.